Next up is a more interesting one because Minnesota has a very strange deal where they weirdly have a roster that could be in flux surrounding, I would say, Anthony Edwards more than Karl Towns, because Karl Towns, they actually have something of a decision to make. Karl Towns can sign a 4-year extension for a relatively large amount of money that I believe is right around $200 million.
That sounds right.
And
Yeah.
Minnesota has to make a call on whether or not they want to offer him that deal. Do you offer Karl Towns 4 years, $200 million if you're Minnesota? I think that's actually an even more material question than it is whether or not they move on from some of their other core pieces like D'Angelo Russell.
I do make that offer as Minnesota because Karl Anthony Towns has been an excellent player when he has been available, and you're trying to build the talent base and trying to keep talent around. And if you don't make that offer, then you run a real risk that he's going to be out of there within like a year. And the odds that you move Karl Anthony Towns in a deal that makes you better, honestly, in either the near term or the long term, is actually pretty low. Like, that's just
Yep.
not how these deals usually work. And so, and Towns, this will be his age 27 season, so you could be getting some downside because that extension won't even kick in the 4 years until 24, because that's,
Yep.
he's already under contract for those 2 years, just like his buddy Devin Booker. So yeah, I make the offer, and you hope that he takes it. And if he doesn't take it, then the other reason you offer it is because if you offer it and he doesn't take it, then you also get an extremely valuable piece of information.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And if I'm Karl Towns, I take that money and run.
Whew. And run. Yes.
4 years, $210 million. Karl Towns in 2028, I believe, would be 33 years old, and he could be making $60 million as a look. Karl Towns will probably age well offensively because of his skill level and because of his shooting, but that could look really bad defensively by the time he's 31 years old or whatever he would be in 2027, right? Like there's a real chance that contract ages poorly, but I think you have to offer it if you're Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. D'Angelo Russell is the next big decision here. I have no idea what they should do with D'Angelo Russell.
I do.
I think you probably move him at the end of the day and see what you can get for him, but I mean,
but what makes Russell's situation a little bit different than some of the other ones. So I wrote this whole piece for The Athletic about extend or trade guys. And so the idea is that it's a player who is a pending the year later unrestricted free agent. So instead of putting yourself in our colleague John Hollinger's bird rights trap, where it's just like, oh crap, we have to do something with this guy, otherwise we're going to lose him and it's going to make our team worse, is that you make that decision a year early by offering an extension. If they don't take it, or if you can't come to terms, then you just move them and making their decision. But with Russell, it's a little bit different for this specific reason. If they theoretically just let D'Angelo Russell walk in 23, Minnesota could have real cap space. And I'm not saying they're going to get a max caliber guy with that, but that opens up trade possibilities. What that means is you're not going to lose him for nothing. You are going to be able to replace his salary slot with basically the same salary slot. And so what that means is I still would probably trade him, because I think the future of this team is the Edwards-Towns combination. I actually think it's better offensively and defensively. So I would be doing it anyway. But if the deals were really weak, then you bring him back and you see how the year goes, because you don't want to make your team worse for no good reason.
Yeah, I agree. Like the question is, what do you get for D'Angelo Russell? Because that's what I'm struggling with.
The dream would be a top 7 guy in your rotation who's under contract, under team control, let's put it that way, for more than just next year. If you could do that, I'd be happy. And that's not a high bar, but I've been lower on D'Angelo Russell than almost everybody for like 7 years now. And I think that's mostly borne out.
It's not a high bar, but I just don't know who you get it from. Like Washington could be looking for a point guard and could be looking for, just help, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
And good God, a D'Angelo Russell, Kristaps Porzingis, Bradley Beal core makes me incredibly sad. But I guess theoretically you could do something with Washington where you get maybe one of those like underperforming young guys in like Kyle Kuzma, and like I don't even know. Like, is it Kuzma, KCP, and like something
I
else?
mean, if
Like,
Minnesota could pull that deal, I would do it as them in a heartbeat.
and I feel like I would never do that if I was Washington personally,
Right.
but like I just have no idea what Washington's direction is right
Well,
now.
it's the fun of feeling differently about a player than the person who would trade for him, is that there is
Yeah.
basically no construction of a D'Angelo Russell deal that will actually happen that I would agree with as the other team, because I wouldn't be the type of person who would be trading for D'Angelo Russell. It's how this works. And the Russell Westbrook to the Lakers trade was a fantastic example of that last year. Again, involving the
I'm
Wizards.
I'm really trying to like find the team.
Well, and
Fi-
it's also a weird thing, because we've talked about this a lot over the years on your podcast and mine, that point guard is a valuable position in that if you're not getting 48 good minutes from it, you run into some real problems. So there is value in having good point guards, but there aren't that many teams that you feel like a lack of quality point guard play is really holding them back. That's the thing that is preventing them from reaching their heights. Unless it's like the Blazers, where it's like they were hurt. That's a different part of the conversation. So yeah, I don't have a team that's screaming out as a D'Angelo Russell destination for me personally.
because I do just want to like point out briefly, like I didn't think D'Angelo Russell had a bad year.
No, he
Like for the
didn't.
first 2/3 of the year, I thought he was really good defensively, like comparatively to what he's been previously. Uh, do I think that I want to pay a large amount of money for a guy who averaged 18 points and 7 assists while shooting 41% from the field and 34% from three, and who like may or may not have much juice left in his legs? I don't know. I know he's only 26, but like those, like he's not getting more athletic, is what I would say. Uh, I don't know. I just don't. I don't know who the team like. There's no way. I just thought of something real dumb.
Oh no.
There's no way Minnesota would rather have Russell Westbrook than him, right?
I don't think so. I mean, Westbrook makes every team Westbrooky. And so that is, I don't Minnesota has a good thing going. I don't think you want to, that's not the way. You're not, as Minnesota, you're not looking to like throw over the board right now because you're trailing. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
lose the game. You're pretty happy with what you have.
If you could do D'Angelo Russell for Russell Westbrook and 2 first-round picks, would you do it?
Yes. 2 first-round picks are good, and Westbrook's expiring. Yeah, I would do that.
1 first-round pick.
If it's the Lakers and it's far enough out, yes.
And
Because
it would be.
I'm not the biggest believer in them organizationally for some reason.
Uh, D'Angelo Russell makes sense for that Lakers team.
Well, he does, accept that he's again an open source for teams to pick out defensively. Like, I think when you have LeBron James, you can go a lot more limited offensively in terms of creation. It's part of why Caruso was such a wonderful fit there. Is that
Yeah.
Alex Caruso, not great at creating offense, good at basically everything else, and you have LeBron James to do that part of it.
All of this potential construction is messy, given that it would be sending D'Angelo Russell back to Los Angeles, which worked so well the first
Yeah,
time.
and then you can re-sign Nick Young for the minimum, and we have a really fun team.
And that's not even the most fun part of it. The most fun part of it is sending Russell Westbrook to Minnesota, where he'd be paired with Patrick Beverley.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that part of it. Oh boy. But they could
This is
also
really dumb.
theoretically in that circumstance either buy Westbrook out, and so he could play somewhere that he cared about, or you figure out a component of it. Like Westbrook, as much as he's not worth the money he's getting paid, there is still a useful player in there for at least some teams.
Right. And D'Angelo Russell is not a negative player. Like,
No.
that's the thing. Like, it is not someone where you and I would pay the money and trade assets to where we would trade for him. But D'Angelo Russell is a tangibly better player than Russell Westbrook right now in the NBA.
Yeah, I would
So,
say so. Especially because he's been more willing to, like, if Westbrook were more amenable to like shifting his game based on reality,
yeah.
then it might be different, but that hasn't happened. So Can't bet on it.
Yeah, no, I'm fascinated by what Minnesota does because this Karl Towns extension locks in a Towns Edwards core, and then they can now, if Karl Towns signs it, and I think he has to sign it, just given the amount of money it is, and it then sets them up to really be able to make some moves, like really be able to build around that core long term.